What I'm going to say right now may shock some of you. Socializing can be as dangerous as isolation. We think distractions comes from a phone or Netflix, but the most socially accepted form of distraction is socializing itself. You don't need more people to live a meaningful life. Introvert or extrovert doesn't matter here because most people use people to avoid themselves. When you can't live with yourself, you start filling your life with people you don't really care about. We are always told that socializing is healthy. After all, we are social creatures, right? But here's the paradox. Sometimes the very act of being social is not connection at all. It's an escape. Escape from discomfort. Escape from inner conflict. Escape from lack of clarity within. It's a subtle way to lead to a meaningless life where even your identity doesn't feel like yours. And here's where it gets even more interesting because when I talk about socializing, people jump to categories. Introverts don't do that. Extroverts are naturally social. No, it really doesn't matter if you're an introvert or extrovert. Both of these personalities can use socializing as a shield against themselves, just in different ways. And when I say personality, I'm also referring to the ambiverts here. But for simplicity, I'll just say introvert and extrovert. Although personality is in a spectrum, but for simplicity, I'll again say I'll just refer to introvert and extrovert for reference. So, that being clear, that being sorted, introverts naturally assume that their preference for solitude makes them more reflective, while extroverts assume that their social drive makes them naturally connected to the people around them. An extrovert may drown into constant social interactions, so they never have to sit with themselves. And an introvert might over immerse in familiar but safer circles, potentially with similar personality types, so they never have to confront their own uncertainties. But the core thesis is introversion or extroversion are not the deciding factor. Your intention is. Are you socializing for a real meaningful connection or to just escape from the harder work of clarity, honesty, and solitude? And personality is only half the story. The deeper influence comes from the culture you have been raised in. Because whether you are an introvert or extrovert, the way you socialize and what it means to your identity changes drastically between an individualist society and collectivist societies. Culture shapes how we socialize in ways we rarely notice. In individualist societies like in US or much of Europe, people are taught from early on that they must stand out, they must be unique, and they must express themselves. Socializing there isn't much about belonging. I mean, that is, but less about belonging and more about performing. Conversations and friendships often orbit around self presentation, career, opinions, lifestyle choices, etc. etc. Success in socializing is judged by how interesting, charismatic, or independent you seem, not by how well you blend in. Because of this, socializing can turn into a stage performance where you are constantly managing how others perceive you. So, while it can look like freedom, like I can be whoever I want, it can also be a trap because you spend so much energy performing identities that you aren't even sure are yours. On the other hand, in collectivist societies like in India or Japan, the story flips. The emphasis is not on projecting individuality, but on preserving harmony, belonging, and reputation within the group. Socializing here is less about who I am and more about how well am I blending in. At first, it may seem healthy, like community, support, help, but it also carries a trap of its own kind. In collectivist societies, socializing can be a way to get dissolved into the group so much that you never face yourself as an individual. You risk inheriting a borrowed identity shaped by family, community, or tradition, while your own identity remains muted, potentially for the whole life. Socializing in individualist society is often about covering the fear of insignificance, and socializing in collectivist societies is often about covering the fear of exclusion. In individualist societies, you risk losing yourself in performance. In collectivist society, you risk losing yourself in groups. And that's the irony. No matter the personality, no matter the culture, the core idea or the core problem is the same. You can be surrounded by the people, but feel completely disconnected from yourself. And so, you find ways to use socializing as avoidance in two different ways. Firstly comes active avoidance. When you deliberately seek out to escape being alone, you fill every empty space with plans. You jump at every invitation, not because you want to, but because silence feels unbearable. It's a constant chase. The fear of stillness pushes you into the noise. Secondly comes passive avoidance, which is probably the most common type of avoidance mechanism that people use in this modern age. Here, you don't avoid people, but you also don't allow yourself to disconnect from them. You stay endlessly available, replying instantly, scrolling social feeds, lingering in group chats, not because they give you value, but because they are your fillers to escape sitting and confronting yourself. It's avoidance by default, not by choice. And the fact is, both forms look socially normal. Active avoidance seems like the life of every party kind of person, and the passive avoidance is simply labeled as digitally well connected. But behind the scenes, the same mechanism is at play, socializing to avoid yourself, an unwillingness to face what comes up in solitude. And the problem with both types of avoidance mechanism is that they don't just keep you distracted, but they slowly reshape you. When you overuse socializing as a shield, it comes at a cost, not just to your time, but to your identity. And the truth is, we all use socializing as an avoidance to a degree. It's a part of being human. We lean on to trusted people when we are uncertain. We seek company to regulate emotions. And sometimes we distract ourselves in conversation because silence feels too heavy. And in healthy doses, this is actually natural and even necessary, as we are human creatures. But when you begin to always outsource your sense of identity and stability, it becomes a problem. At this point, socializing is more about avoidance than about connection. Over time, this reliance erodes your self definition. You start to lose the line between who you are and what others want you to be. And that's where identity dilution sets in. It is especially dangerous because it doesn't feel like a loss. In fact, it feels just the opposite. You feel socially alive, you feel socially connected. But that sense of connection or that sense of life is often a mask. You're not living from inside out, you're living from outside in. And that is a problem. Avoidant socializing also breeds a kind of quiet conformity. To stay comfortable in the group, you learn to suppress the parts of yourself, that could break the harmony. And after a certain threshold of avoidant socializing, you end up lonelier than ever. Because when people connect with the mask you wear, they do not connect with who you truly are. That means the relationships built by avoidant socializing are often shallow, fragile, and conditional, and deep down, you know it. That's why you only try back to cycles of more avoidance, more performance, more socializing, just to drown out the dissonance. The core problem isn't socializing, it's when we use it to avoid ourselves. The way out isn't to cut off people or withdraw yourself, it's to know yourself first. So when you get into the crowd, you don't dissolve into it. You don't have to quit socializing, but you have to change the way you socialize. When you unconsciously or unwillingly suppress or change your beliefs, opinions, values, or priorities just to conform with the people around you, you unknowingly start the process of identity dilution yourself. And the fact is, most people's identities are actually diluted. The first step to move away and break free from identity dilution is to recognize it. That means becoming aware of when you're using socializing as a shield. It means to get honest with your motivation behind interactions. Ask yourself, am I showing up to connect or just to distract myself? I mean, this distinction itself is enough to know the truth about whether the interactions in your life is giving to your identity or quietly draining it. Awareness itself reduces the unconscious pull. Once you become aware of the motivation behind your interactions, the next step is to recalibrate your interactions. This means shifting from solitude being accidental to solitude being intentional. It's not just about being alone, it's about actively engaging with yourself. about your life, about the relations you hold. And I know this is a very boring conventional talk, but journal or sit with yourself long enough for buried thoughts to rise up and recalibration. Your entangled, borrowed identities. The roles you have been playing unconsciously for approval. The mask that helped you blend in. This is the point when you realign, consciously choosing which values, influences, or beliefs to keep and which to release. You give space to your identity to deepen its roots. And now, when you re engage into socializing after recalibration, you show up differently. You no longer attend everything, you just choose the ones which align with your values. You no longer mirror group opinions just to belong and feel relatable. You carve your own path, and that's what the quality of a great thought leader is. In short, recognize that you have been using socializing as an avoidance. Recalibrate, that means to consciously choose which values, beliefs, or influences to keep, then re engage. This is the phase when you can say what doesn't align with your values without guilt or insecurity. And actually, reaching to this phase requires work because we have been trained to think and act in ways that align with the people around us. It's not a one day awakening or, you know, quick reset. It's a gradual process to undress your identities that aren't yours and build up the courage to stay aligned with your values without a feeling of guilt or insecurity. And one final thing I want to address is that you'll find very less people with whom you can form deep and meaningful relation, whether it's friendship, romantic relation, or business relation, or any other form of relation. You'll find very less people who align with the right values. And the reality is, most people don't get the value of values. Most people are running their life without values. And so you will get less people. And in fact, that's good. That's great. That's to your favor. I'll repeat it again. You don't need more people. Doesn't matter your so called personality type to feel meaningful. Because no amount of people can make you feel whole if you can't stay with yourself. At its core, socializing isn't the problem. The problem begins when we use it as a shield, a way to drown out silence and to avoid the work of facing ourselves. The first link in the description to get your free Notion tracking template with weekly summaries. And I'm also currently building a advanced version of that template which has weekly, monthly, quarterly and yearly summaries, graphs, trend lines, auto calculations and all of these things which will be a paid offer. So that being clear, that being sorted, if you want to support my work, join the community of focused, like-minded individuals. That's it. I appreciate you watched till the end. See you soon.